Hello and welcome to week 6 of the course. We're moving right along. I think that we have interesting couple months ahead of us now, and we don't want to get behind. This week we have a lot of material, so I've decided to divide the material into two parts. The first part is going to cover everything that we have as new material for week 6, chapter 6, and so on. Then I'm going to have a review for the midterm. So first, when we look at a quick overview of everything that will be assigned this week, one that's not in the list of videos, but that I thought was useful for your preparing to work on the methods assignment. The methods assignment is going to be talked about a good deal more in class. Remember, this is a week when we have an in-class meeting. If you're going to miss the in-class meeting, then you definitely want to watch the Badenhorst video. But even if we are in class together, this will still be supplemental material. And I would say that what I'm hoping for your methods section might be slightly different than what she says in the video. However, you'll be pretty safe as you work forward on the methods assignment if you follow the directions that she suggests. There's some more particulars, and I've included the actual methods assignment in this week's assignment. What I would really strongly recommend, and I strongly hope from all of you, if you do not understand the methods assignment, if you're looking at it and there's some element that you're saying, I don't know what's going on here, then you need to contact me. Now, the great and wonderful thing to do would be to contact me in the group discussion on the D2L page, so that the response that I give you will be available to everyone. But rather than doing badly in the course, you should definitely ask, right? You'll have your classmates, and they'll be able to give you some idea of what you should do, provided they know what they're supposed to do. But your incorrect guessing isn't going to get you where you need to be. Delegate one of you to actually ask, and then even if somebody else is delegated, ask yourself. The next thing you're going to want is to read chapter 6 and watch the slide presentation. It's a voiceover presentation. It's about causality. You're going to be working on your literature review, and you're going to need to make sure that you have some notion of how causality works, how other people have claimed causality works, and how you're going to apply it to answer your research question. Remember, we're not writing a mystery novel here. You should probably know on the day that you start writing your introduction exactly how causality works. If you're going back and you're trying to figure it out, well, it's going to make your paper weaker. In fact, one of the things that is most important for you to learn this semester is that you should always know what the answer is before you start writing the paper. The research was something that you did before. The write-up is what you're telling. You're giving a historical account of what has already happened. If you're learning as you write, then your paper is going to be weak. And I encourage you strongly to watch the video that's going to help you review for the exam. I feel that you'll do much better on your midterm exam, having actually prepared for it. There's always the student who just off the top, if you've read every chapter, if you are very familiar with all the concepts, maybe you can find 4 out of 6 questions to answer without reviewing. So let's talk a little bit about causality. So why do we care about causality? Because we have a research question that's normally going to be answered by a hypothesis that's going to describe how changing some factor will lead to a change in another. Uh, we talk about it in terms of cause and effect, but what is a cause and effect relationship? A cause and reflect relationship is saying when one thing changes from its initial state, it will cause something else to change. If we say that wind causes trees to rustle, well, how do we measure that? Well, we measure it against that initial state where there is no wind, and then we observe that there is wind, and then we say, wow, there's wind. Now let's look about our environment. There's a tree. What was the tree like when there was no wind? It wasn't moving. Now that there is wind, it is. In fact, quite often we work the other way. We assume there's wind when we first have seen the tree moving out the window. But we wouldn't say that the tree causes the wind, or would we? Well, we have to understand the causal mechanism. After all, we do know that if you take like palm fronds, you could wave those palm fronds in such a way as it creates a breeze in somebody's face. You know, if you were a pharaoh in ancient Egypt, you would have two people whose sole job it was to wave palm fronds over you so that you would have your little tiny bit of air conditioning in a world where such things didn't exist. So perhaps every time we feel wind, it's because enough people in enough places are waving tree branches. But how would we argue against that? Well, there's really three, possibly four ways to talk about this. First of all, we've noticed that there's covariation there. There's a change in the amount of breeze, and there's a change in how the tree is acting. This is called covariation. Another term for it is correlation, and we all know for a fact that correlation doesn't equal causality. Everybody tells us that all the time. So how do we get around the fact that there's correlation and that's not causality? Well, another thing that we would want to look at is the time sequence. Does the breeze happen before the trees? If you're standing between the direction that the trees are coming from, and if you're standing between the direction where the breeze is coming from and where the tree is, then you should actually feel the breeze ever so slightly before the tree does. Maybe what we do instead is we say, well, the breeze seems to be coming from the west to the east, and so as we feel the breeze from the west to the east, do we then look up and see the tree moving? Well, if the tree is behind us, then the breeze should be moving away from the tree if it's caused by the tree branches, right? So that would be one way that we could look into it. Another thing we could do is we could look at several different trees, and if the breeze is still blowing on us even when we're going to a different tree, but the breeze is all in the same direction and the trees are all over the place. You know, if there's a tree on one side of my yard and a tree on the other side of my yard, why are both trees blowing in the same direction? Why is the breeze going the same direction? Shouldn't I be getting the breeze from both sides like the pharaoh? So this is time order. What happens first? Does the tree move first, or does the breeze start first? And then we want to look at then we want to look at our explanation, our theoretical explanation, our proposed causal mechanism. And if our proposed causal mechanism makes sense, well, first of all, in order to argue that it's made sense, we need to establish a story of how it has. An assertion of causality, your book calls it. it seems kind of odd, right? It seems kind of odd that there would be a line of people all the way from the northern part of the United States down to the Gulf of Mexico that are all waving the trees in the same direction. If some people are stronger than other people, then the breeze should be stronger in the places where people are stronger. But what if we believe that the differences in pressurization in the atmosphere lead to wind, and that the wind then blows the breeze? And then you say, is that an intervening variable? In a sense, it's an intervening variable. In a sense, you could argue that really really it's the low pressure system that's causing the tree to move. But without the intermediate step of the wind blowing, we wouldn't see the trees move. You know, how do we know that? Well, think about the eye of a hurricane, right? A well-defined eye of the hurricane, and the all of a sudden it becomes less breezy. Is that because you are suddenly not in a low pressure system? No, you're kind of really in one. So what we need to think about, what we need to consider with this is, what is the story? What makes the most sense? Well, if we're considering a very small level, like your hometown or what you see out your window, we would definitely want to tell the story of the wind. If we're trying to figure out what causes windiness on a given day, yes, frontal systems and the weather are a good explanation. Now, what you need to do, if that doesn't jump out at you as the absolute best answer, then take a step back and think to yourself, what is it exactly that my research answer, my hypothesis, what is the story it's trying to tell? If I go back to our idea of construct validity, how exactly am I going to operationalize my theory of how the world works, of my theorized hypothesis, my theorized causal mechanism? I gave you an idea for a breezy day. How are you going to measure it for your specific research question? And that's going to be your challenge. So I would definitely watch the PowerPoint slides, and I would take a moment as I'm looking at the PowerPoint slides to say, how do each of these slides apply to my research? I would say that you're at a point where you're starting to fall behind if you haven't already developed some idea of why of the answer to your research question. And if you still don't know, it's time for you to seriously attack JSTOR and to find some articles and read what they're about and what they claim. There's really no substitute for doing research for a research paper. Nevertheless, I would understand if toward the end of the week you change gears and you start to work on your midterm exam. And we will meet in class. I'll talk a little bit about both of those assignments. I'll talk about the methods assignment. I'll talk about the midterm, and I will talk a little bit about causality. So this gives you a great chance. Start to think about questions you might ask. I have the two ghosts behind me, and I have my stuffed dogs. Rogers was my toy dog when I was very tiny, and the other one is Hanford. I have my clocks. I have a clock from my apartment, and I have my grandmother's clock behind me. A candle, a saying that my daughter gave me. But if all you're getting from it is the decoration, then you definitely need to come to class and you need to ask questions, right? I would hope that what I've just told you will inspire you to ask other questions? All right, I wish you all well, and be sure to watch the exam review.